Debbie Everett. Debbie is a consultant with the Leslie Group. She does other stuff too, but she does stuff for us. And we actually, our relationship started, I think, well, first off, I think you would come to a couple of my sessions, right?
Yep,
absolutely.
absolutely.
You were an administrator at a school, and I started consulting there. And as time progressed, we ended up realizing that we believed a lot of the same stuff, and we're like, yes, that's true. So when I started doing the kindergarten work with the Arizona Department of Education, I needed to find people who knew stuff about kids, like really knew stuff. And Debbie was one of the first people I thought of, like, and being able to really, how do you take this philosophical foundation and move it into the kindergarten first and second and then third grade world. Our focus was kindergarten, but so many of our conversations were around kindergarten through third, because that still is early childhood.
And it's also related. It just doesn't change that much. It's the same ideas, maybe enacted a little differently, but basically the same. Yeah,
absolutely. And so we were talking about, I've been on a lot talking about that virtual transit, or the transition from virtual to in-person. And because a lot of schools are starting up again. And so I was talking to Debbie about this, and I was like, okay, and I get thrown a bunch of ideas out, but this is like an opportunity, I think, for you and I to have a conversation that folks can, I think, be a part of, to have a different perspective, because our lenses, even though we believe a lot of the same things, you and I have very different ways that we might approach things, different ideas. And so, so let's just kind of talk about what you think is important as teachers are planning to move from the virtual experience of learning into an in-person experience. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, my initial thoughts to all of this is a challenging time. This is very different. This is not something that we've done before. And part of, I think, the challenge is that so many of us have these ideas. We know how we would like to be teaching. We know what we would like to be doing. We know how important it is to connect with kids. We know how important all these things are, that right now are either very challenging to do or at best look very different. And given all of that, people have worked really hard to figure out how to do the best they can online. And I think probably none of us would think that was the best way to deliver education to young children. It was all that we had. And so people were doing it. Now there's this opportunity to transition into the classroom. The children have had some experiences with these teachers, maybe experiences with some of the other children, but it's going to look really different. I was looking at actually a document, Isela, that you helped create, or that you did create when we first started working together. And one of the lines in there, one of the things that it said is how when children know what is expected from them through transitions, they do so much better. And this is a great opportunity to help children actually transition to school. We were talking the other day about how actually in some ways, or we never would have chosen this, children get to now come into school and the teacher is familiar to them. It's not a brand new person.
Yeah, I want to say something about that. So I meet regularly with the school district. And so I've been asking and this is on an every week basis. And so I asked teachers, how are things going? Like because they have transitioned back into the classroom. And they said the transition was amazing. Like the kids came in, they had seen these faces before. They had heard the teacher's voice. They'd seen her online. They were able to come in. The teachers did a really nice job, I think, of doing sort of a tour of what the classroom would look like, what the school would look like. And for me, even though this has been a really challenging time, I think, whoa, that's kind of cool. Like for next time, if we started school the way we normally start school, I would, if I was a classroom teacher, actually start some virtual connections with children. Sometimes good things come from difficult situations.
Well, and a long time ago, when I was certainly teaching very young children, we often would write a letter to the child before school started to introduce ourselves, maybe send a photo. And this is a step up from that. You can actually talk to each other and be familiar, not to say, oh, we'll do all teaching online at all, but we can use these tools to help with things like that. Yeah.
Right.
But even in having said that, it is possible, and and this is where different districts, different schools are going to have different ways of doing that. At some schools, they may be used to seeing their teacher, but now she's going to have a mask on when they go into the classroom. And that, though, I think is another way we can use technology to help the students out. Here's what I look like. Here's how I look with my mask. Here, and doing that back and forth. Maybe even having them do that if they're going to have to wear masks. Let them say, well, let's see what Isela looks like with her mask on. And just again, doing that kind of practicing. I think so much of this is we have to acknowledge how the children are feeling, and give them these ideas that, sometimes I don't like to wear my mask, but here's why I do. There's so much of this, I think, that fits into the 3 rules that we often talk about. If I take care of myself, I take care of others, I take care of our things. And so, part of wearing a mask is it's how we help take care of others, and just and ourselves as well. So there's so many things that actually can kind of fit in with this whole sort of philosophy and way of approaching and working with young children.
So
Yeah.
An idea that I had with the mask on, mask off, like I think about every time we talk and, we share kind of our I think it's more like philosophical beliefs about things. And then from that comes like, what would that look like in practice, right?
Yeah,
That's just
right.
normally what we do. We believe this. So what do we do with it?
Yeah.
Right. And so when you talk about using technology and mask on, mask off, I used to make these memory cards with kids where I would take photographs of children and, that old memory game, right? And that I really am not very good at even now. It's a good practice for me. But I would make pictures of children and I would have them, flip and see if they can match the 2 kids, especially at the beginning of the year. But then I started to do stuff like just headshot, then full body shot. And then so they would match those 2. But I would actually do a mask on, mask off one where they would match, right? And I think like that really incorporates their life experiences into what we offer in the classroom. I think helps them, feel calm, feel safe, feel connected, all the things that I think are super important. And that sense of community in an activity like that.
Absolutely. And they're becoming more familiar with who else is in their community and how many times have we talked about real, relevant, and meaningful. If we don't address the kinds of things that are different, that they're struggling with, that they're having questions about, maybe mixed feelings about, we're not going to be able to get to the other things. And so finding ways that they can actually be a part of that. Another one, and we did talk about this the other day too, is having masks for dolls, so that they can have some control over putting a mask on, taking it off, explaining to the little baby why they have to have it, and that they're in that position rather than just being the ones who it's being done to.
I have a friend who she loves baby dolls. My daughter didn't play with baby dolls. She played with cars and trucks and that kind of thing. I love baby dolls. So I was such a, like in the classroom, I would totally play baby dolls and family and stuff with kids. And so she had all her baby dolls lined up and, she's a very good mommy to her baby dolls. My friend's daughter. And I put something like, wear their masks. And she's like, they're under 2. They don't wear masks. Duh. That was hysterical. Yeah. But I would totally, even in my prior, before I knew how to sew years, what I would have done, honestly, I would have taken a piece of fabric and taken a stapler because I used to just make stuff with a stapler. And it was my machine. But I would staple a little mask with string on it, and then I would just put them in the sociodramatic play area because I think kids need to play these experiences out.
Yes, absolutely. Act out what they themselves are going through. But it made me think of something else when you said that. One of the things that we always found so helpful, part of it is, one of the things I think is important is how do children now, as they're transitioning in, how do they feel that they are part of this community? Depending again on the rules in certain classrooms, we may be asking them not to be very close to others, to do more solitary play than we might normally be doing. And so how do we make them feel like this is their classroom and their community? And one thing is, if possible, are there things they could bring into the classroom? So I was just thinking there might be some moms or dads who are great at sewing and would be willing to send something in. But is there some way that they can contribute things that are going to be used in the classroom. And if you're not a sewer, that could be another way to get them to do that, or being able to bring something of themselves into the classroom. One of the things I thought about with that in particular that I think is going to be more challenging is it's possible in this new era that we can't have a communal safe space for children to go when they're just needing to decompress and feel better. So what can we do? What can there be? And, maybe everyone has their own place. Maybe it's at their assigned place where they sit. So then what do they have that are the tools that might help them to be able to do that? And different children may need different things, but how can we individualize so they're getting the same support, the same benefits that we used to do in a very different kind of way?
I think the challenge for me as someone who provides support to schools and teachers is I feel like I have two different lenses, or many lenses actually,
right.
because in some programs, especially our 0 to 5 programs that are running, I think outside of safety protocols of, hand washing, but we always did that. Like in that 0 to 5 realm, we bleached all day long. I mean, to the point where, teachers during, their hands are just always, you know what I'm saying? It's like rough.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How
Yeah.
much we're sanitizing, we're washing hands all day long. Every time we wipe a nose, we've got to wash our hands. We've got to wash the child's hands. It's something that was already built in. And so there's that lens where a lot of the schools or early childhood programs 0 to 5 are still doing what they've always done. Maybe teachers are now wearing masks, but children are still engaged in the learning environment. And that there's less of, I think, the expectation for children to stay apart from one another, just because
good. Yeah.
I think the challenge is, of course, I mean, they're little kids. We thrive on connection. We need connection.
Mm-hmm.
We need human connection. We need to laugh and play and hug and all of those things.
Right.
And I think a lot of programs are still doing that. Now, when we get into the K on up world, that's the different lens, right? Because, or even some of the pre-K programs in elementary schools, it's like then, and every place, this is what's challenging for me, every place has their own different rules.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to talk about here and what we're sharing with one another, it's like, well, we can't do that. Okay, well, you can't do that. Then what can you do? And that's what we've always said, even in our kindergarten work. It's like, we can't do that. We can't do that. Well, we can't do that. Well, what can you do?
Right. Exactly. How and give whatever those constraints are, and what it is that you're trying to accomplish. How close can you get through these things? I was thinking about, to me, part of building community is singing songs together and just being together in that way, as well as hearing stories and telling stories, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of songs that actually I think are kind of based on making a little bit of a connection. Ella Jenkins just comes to my mind a lot. But there was a song I heard her do where it's called "Who Fed the Chickens?" It's a very simple, repetitive song.
Because I think I know it. Go ahead.
Who fed the chickens? I did. Or who fed the chickens? You did. And it changes each time you sing it. It's someone else who did. He did. She did. They did. We. All those kinds of things. Basically, I think it's to be learning the pronouns, different kinds of pronouns. But even starting online that you're interacting with someone else. So you're pointing to somebody on the Zoom or whatever you're using. And you're saying, you did. That is starting this idea that we're interacting with each other and kind of having fun with it. If it's, who stole the cookies from the cookie jar, whatever it is that we're playing, even though it's done in this way. But then what I think is so important is that comes then in the classroom, that you repeat that. So they come in and they go, I know this song. I know what's expected of me. I know how this goes. And that's one example, but with so many things, I would hope that, especially getting ready to transition into the classroom, how are you greeting kids? What you can do all kinds of virtual, non-touching greetings online. Air high fives, air hugs, namaste, all kinds of things, winking, smiling, but then repeat those in the classroom. And so this is a really good time to think of, as a teacher, what are you comfortable with? What are you going to be able to feel safe and wanting to do, and meets whatever is the each individual school or district's sort of guidelines, but practice them now, so that when the children come in, they're like, I'm familiar with this. It's what we do. Yeah.
I think even welcome songs, I put on YouTube a couple weeks ago, a couple of welcome songs. I had, again, working with teachers, said to them, create a welcome song that you consistently sing every single morning. Even when you're tired of it, even if you want to do something different, you want to sing that, because there's safety in that repetition.
Yes.
And and then when you come into the classroom, like when we're physically present now, welcoming children with that song, so you're preparing them for a very different experience, but with some familiarity, right? Because we're not 3 and 4. I mean, and so it's 3, 4, 5, and 6. So this idea of seeing somebody on a screen, and that's like a real person, like I really wonder how much of that, right? Like how much of that feels concrete in their experience, or like we watch Sesame Street, or we watch things that are on TV, and in a child's brain we recognize that they have a difficult time separating reality from fiction, and so, but how real is this experience to them? So to actually see it, and be around kids, I think is a very unique experience,
I think it's unique. And even if, it can, depending on their experiences, maybe they'll look, I'm used to seeing my grandma online, and then I see her in person, so I know it's real. But regardless of all that, it's different in the brain. So the kind of brain activity that's taking place, like the Harvard, the Center for the Developing Child has done, where the research where they put the electrodes on the kids' heads, and what's firing when they see someone that they know on the screen is very different than when they see that person in person. So it's going to be a different experience, even at the best. There's which I think could possibly feel a little like, I'm a little uncomfortable because this just feels different or is new. And still, I think but there's a lot we can do to just kind of ease that. And the welcoming is huge. But we also, I think, don't want to forget about goodbyes. And what's your ritual saying goodbye? And are you practicing that now? That's when I think more often we would forget to do in our classrooms, or we weren't used to having that being one of the really important rituals as well. So, as we're getting offline, we can do our nice goodbyes.
Yeah, I think that whole idea of receiving children, that's kind of what I've always called it, is like, how do we receive children each day?
Yes.
And I think it's important for us to be really reflective of who your children are, right? And who we are as a classroom community. You have to always take into account children who might have some sensitivities, I think, in terms of sound, and you want to always be inclusive. And so it's like, and so there isn't one way. The way that works for you might be very different in another school, another classroom, but it's to be very intentional about what songs will I sing? How will I greet them? How will I, even when I make eye contact or address them by name, it's like, what are the things that I can do to help them feel connected, to help them feel safe? And to your point, the goodbye rituals are often crazy. I mean, there is no ritual usually. It's someone's coming to pick the kids on the bus. Parents are coming in, knocking on the doors. They're on the back door, so we got to hurry up and get them over there. And then we've got to kids to stay back for the after school program. It's like it's this. And and we might have a gathering at the end, but really, I think thinking about how do you close the day? How do you help them sort of add a sort of a closure to the day, and that you're addressing each and every child. That's the other thing that happens, because there's this movement happening. We miss her, we miss him, it's like we gotta make sure that every child is being connected to.
Absolutely. And creating that ritual or routine so that can really happen. And I think one of the things that we're all very aware of is, well, one, this whole thing is a transition, but we talk about them transitioning in. It's yet another transition. Going home means you're having to sort of change how your brain is working, what you're thinking about, what's going to be expected of you, all of those kinds of things. And through all of this, I just think teachers have to be so being very cognizant of it, also having it be a sort of a continued conversation about how we are feeling about these things. That these are, that it's our, this might feel different, that might feel tough, you might be a little scared, you might, and bring those things up as really legitimate ways to feel. And what can we do with those feelings? I think this is a time to find those books that address all kinds of different ways of being and feeling, that address, and songs as well. And how can we help children, one, to be able to identify those feelings and be able to name them, and then know kind of where to go with it, what they can do about it, and what do we have in place, again, to support them so that they can do so successfully or more successfully, move that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think using that I think it's such an important part of our day-to-day interactions is, number one, addressing even when I'm feeling frustrated. So I think I'm feeling frustrated right now. My mask is making it difficult for me to breathe. I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to try to take a deep breath. And then I'm going to reset. And so I think being open about your own experience, I think to the level of where it's appropriate, right? You're not going to be like, horrible thing happened. Right. But it's helping them see you work through those experiences, but also giving them the language. Sometimes it can feel frustrating. It looks like I'm looking at your eyes and I'm wondering if you're feeling frustrated right now. Yeah. What can we do? Yeah. Let's talk about the things that we can do. Yeah.
Well, and speaking of, I see your eyes is changing that song. If you're happy and you know it, your face will surely show it. If they have to wear masks, if you're happy and you know it, your eyes will surely show it. You know, how do you smile with your eyes? How do you scowl with your eyes? It's helping them understand this range of emotions, but also that I can read other people. I can get a sense without having to see their whole face.
That's a tough thing. And, I really thought a lot about that because, when I go to the grocery store and you're passing someone or you're, engaging, usually for me anyway, I will smile. Yes. I'll go, oh, go ahead. Right. And then smile and nod. And so many times I've caught myself where I'm smiling, but they can't see that.
They don't know. They don't. Right. Exactly. Yeah. But, we might have to be talking about body language and reading beyond just this facial expression, which we've spent so much time on. And there are people who say, oh, I can tell you're smiling by your eyes. So there is probably a bit to that, but it's not something that we've been practicing so much. But just, again, giving children all those opportunities to at least talk about those experiences and to work through them. And I just, what you said about that modeling, one of the language, but also I'm going to do something for myself. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to kind of pull myself back together, and then I'm going to re-enter into whatever it is. What a great support for children. It's like, oh, I can do that too.
Right there, you said it. So there's a mantra that I say in my life. It starts with, I am safe, I am calm, I can do this. I am safe, I am calm, I can do this. So anytime I get to a place of sort of freaking out or feeling uncertain about something, I take a deep breath, take a couple deep breaths. And for children, we can even have them learn to pick their arms up if they need a deep breath, because it forces them to take the breath into the belly. So I take a deep breath and then say that mantra. And I would actually say that out loud. So I am safe, I am calm, I can do this. Then readjust my mask and be able to support them through that experience, because children are watching. Always, our ear to
always. Yeah.
Our language, whether it's spoken or not, they're picking up on all of those nuances. And so we are really the pillar of strength. And so in order for us to be in that, we have to live that in everything that we think and say and do while we're, children.
Sure. And I think it's important to acknowledge that pillar of strength doesn't mean you don't get frustrated. It doesn't mean, it just means that you know what to do, or you know how to support yourself if you're feeling that way, for young children, where to turn for help if they're wanting that. But starting to have those physical actions, that makes such a difference. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the things that children, as they transition in, what are some of the things that we might have in our classroom, maybe ready for them to see or to, like, do you have any ideas around that or thoughts around that?
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about is this whole idea of it's so important that they feel like they're a part of this community, and in some little way they've maybe been a part of this community because they've done it online, but not in person. But the teacher has the advantage of being able to take a lot of photographs while the children are virtually, and also to maybe get families to send it in. So I think the children should be able to see themselves all over the classroom. Certainly there's a picture in their cubby, there's family and friends walls, maybe there's picture frames with those things that looks like they come in, not only they see themselves, but they see their extended families as well, but also they see their classmates. So some of those books that we often make early in the year, Brown Bear, who do you see? I see Stella looking at me, I see Jonathan looking at me. Those that we can have those made with their pictures in there, so that they see themselves as part of that, and that they're it's in the library, but it's they've contributed because they're in that book. Or I think one of the first alphabet books should be of who has an A in their name, they're on the A page, and if you have a B on your name, you're on the B page. And so you are connected to this classroom, but also to this curriculum. There's a book, Isela, that we've used, you and I've used, of I think it's called The Best Part of Me, where, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's a chance for children to say, I really like my elbow because, or my
Yeah.
ear, or my neck, it doesn't matter what. But they're sharing of themselves to put this together. So
So I
all
would do
those,
that virtually. So let me stop you there. I
mm,
would do that virtually. So what I would do is I would share that story, because that story really is like a fourth grade, fifth
oh,
grade, because
absolutely,
the older
yes,
kids made it. And what it
yes.
is, the best part of me, it's a child chooses their favorite part of their body. It could be their nose, it could be their eyebrows, it could be their knees. And then there's a picture of that. And then the child talks about why that's their favorite part of them. And I would actually do virtually say, show me, Joshua, show me your favorite part of your body. And I
Yeah.
would do a screenshot of that. And then when they came in, I would have the photo of Joshua with his knee or his ankle or whatever is his favorite part of his body. And depending on the age of the child, even a description of why. And
Yes.
so the idea, do you remember Bev Boss? I just want to throw this in there because when you were talking, I was thinking of Bev. And Bev Boss is sort of like the great grandmother or the grandmother of early childhood education. It's like every conference, NAEYC conference, I went to go see her. And I'd seen her a million times. It didn't matter. And
No,
there
it
was
was just wonderful.
it was just this magical experience. It's a huge ballroom. There's like hundreds of people in there. So it's not like it's this intimate experience, but
Mhm.
it's this huge ballroom. And her and Michael would be up there singing. And she
Mhm.
would always start with the song, We've Been Waiting for You to Come to This Place. I have a
And you
horrible
felt good,
singing
right?
voice.
You felt
Oh
good
my
when you
goodness.
were there.
She's singing. She's like, we've been waiting for you to come to this place.
Yep.
Wherever you're from, we're glad that you've come. We've been waiting for you to come to this place. And you felt like she was singing to you. You
Yeah.
just felt like she was waiting for you, not all these
Hmm.
400 people that
Right,
are in this
right.
room, but for you. And that's the part that I think that we can create that on a virtual experience,
Yes,
and we
yes,
need to create that in the classroom. So what you were
right.
talking about is, where am I in this room?
Yeah.
And if anything, I want teachers to think about, we get so caught up in the decorating and it being like
Hmm.
these
Hmm.
playful little, that says nothing about who we are as a community. That's your classroom as a teacher.
Yeah.
And instead of our classroom, like, who belongs here? Who's a
Hmm.
part
Hmm.
of this? It's like, I need to see myself and my peers, my classmates in
Hmm.
here, because we are collectively a community. And that's what we should be thinking about as we transition back into the classroom.
Right. Yes. And how do we make that visible? How do we make
Right.
it visible? And some of it is, it's not visible in that way because it is in terms of song and coming together and sharing in that way. But some of it can also be, and let's make books that are about us, and
Mhm.
let's have community projects that we can work on. Yeah. Yeah.
My lens always, because of just my experience of who I've worked with, always, and my life experience, always goes to my kiddos who are experiencing trauma or who have had traumatic backgrounds. That's just my lens.
Mhm.
And for me, it makes my role, or it made my role and my responsibility, I think, so much greater, because when children showed up each day, for some children, not all, but for some children, this is their safe place.
Right.
This
Right.
is where they get that love and connection. And I'm not trying to place judgment, because I think everyone is doing the best that they can do. I really, in my heart of hearts, believe everyone is doing exactly the best that they can give. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
when the child walks into my classroom, it's got the threshold, I call it the threshold of walking into our classroom. It's like, I get to offer safety. I get to offer connection. I
Yeah.
get to offer an experience of feeling like they truly belong here.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think some of that means that you know the child
Oh yeah.
and as an individual. As you were saying, I was thinking one of the things that that we used to do and try to support teachers in doing with young children is just singing those songs they just totally make up out of the blue. I'm walking with Joshua to the library now, and that you're just but it's such a way of acknowledging the child and describing what they're doing in your time with them.
Mhm.
Just so that again they feel that connection and time together. It's so
Mhm.
important. Yeah.
Breaking out in song, I would do that all the time, is break out in song. I would literally,
Yes.
like, if I was sitting with actually, I did that not too long ago. I was sitting with a child who was waiting. He was probably fifth grade, like a big kid. And I was waiting. I forget why I was waiting there. I think I was waiting for the kids to come back inside from the playground. And there
Mhm.
was a kid who was waiting outside the nurse's office. And so the door was shut in the hallway, and he sat on the floor. And I just kind of ran, I put my back against the wall, and I was just sort of standing there. And all of a sudden I found myself like leaning down, and then I was sitting next to the kid. And so I said, "So you're waiting for the nurse?" And he looks at me like, "You're a stranger. I don't know you." And
Yeah.
so I introduced myself, and that I worked with one of the teachers. And so then we were sitting there for like good 10 minutes. I just started singing. I just started singing. And you know what I did? Because I kind of felt like, he was really
He
not
needed
feeling
it.
right to tell. Yeah, he needed it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I was like, I see you. I see you. I see you sitting next to me. I mean, I was like, fifth grade. This is a big kid.
And it, right.
Like this
Yeah.
weirdo,
Yeah.
right? But
Right.
he looked at me, and I could feel the sense where he really needed that connection in that moment for
Sure.
whatever reason.
Sure.
And
Right.
sometimes I think it's coming from that heart space, right? It's
Mhm.
coming from that place of, I'm here to offer a connection. And if
Right.
it feels right, I'm going to trust that experience.
Right, exactly. And it just it's a way when you're not even sort of sure what to say or what to do, just just be there with them and singing that song.
That weird
You,
lady started singing to me.
well, in my one of my first jobs in a Head Start many years ago, my teacher assistant after a few weeks looked at me and she said, "I feel like we're just living in a musical." Because we I was like, well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But really, like, when we're transitioning, so you don't need, I mean, of course, the challenge with that is that kids are going to be like, "You're not singing it right."
Well,
Because
of
that's how
course.
we sang yesterday, right?
That's right. Yes.
But so you want to learn your songs, but I would just
Yeah.
be like, "Okay, we're marching inside. We're marching inside. Here we go. We're marching inside." I just make crap up as I go. And then, like you were saying, with individual children, that whole idea of making connection through
Mhm.
song and being
Mhm.
inclusive of their names, and I think it's such a powerful experience for so many kids.
Well, I think it also speaks to, and this is something that certainly can start online where teachers are playing with songs and things, but part of the reason for just singing it yourself and not listening to a tape or a CD or something like that is you get to change it and you get to change it based on them and they will have ideas. As you were saying that about how you kept making up songs, I was thinking, and the children will start doing that too. If they've
Right.
seen this enough, it's like, oh, okay, we can just we can be the creators of this.
The
Yeah.
creators of it, I think, is really important, but also it's the opportunity to play with language.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
we, even though we're coming from a social emotional perspective and we're looking at things that are important in making those kinds of connections, I think it's important to also say that that language piece is the precursor for reading and writing.
It
And far
absolutely, yes.
we ignore that part. And so the more you can sing, the more you can connect, the more you can do those types of experiences, the richer that foundation is as they get into those older grades.
Absolutely, and so much, and I think part of the reason that we talk so much about the social emotional element of it is because it is so core to all the rest. But the truth of it is that more solid, the more we can support them in their social emotional development, there's a direct correlation to their cognitive growth as well. So,
Right.
even if someone says, well, my main thing is that they're learning these academics, then it really behooves you to support all of this as well, so that they have the space in order to be able to do those things. And one's not happening without the other. It's
Right.
kind of delightful. Yeah. Those
So what other
books that we
ideas do
were,
you have for us?
I'm sorry.
What other ideas do you have for us, Debbie?
Oh, let me see if I jotted some down. One was, and this is sort of a classroom management kind of things. If there's practices that you use as a way to get everyone to look at you, or something like to practice that still on online. So if you're like, if you can hear my voice, wiggle your fingers, have them do it now and say it really quiet, and do those, whatever those kinds of things are that help you to just have the day flow. Practice them now. So when the children come in, they're familiar with them. It's not just like, what? Because a lot of these things you may not have had to do when it's online. You're like, I have your attention or I don't. But these are the times to start giving those children the support. I think you want, and this is in any classroom, right? You want to be reading those stories that are really engaging and exciting. Have those same stories in the classroom. Have those be the first stories that they hear when they're there. Another
Okay,
thing that
wait. I'm going to jump in because you said something and I want to address it with other work that I've been doing. You said something about sort of helping kids understand, I call it the cueing systems, right? It's like
yes.
how do we gather together? This is what I'm going to say. This is what I'm going to do to kind of pull us together. So I think it's important for us to do that virtually and prepare them, right? When they come in so they have an understanding of it.
Yeah.
The other thing that's come up because I'm doing like transformative talks where we're talking about race, equity, and ability. And I think the important thing to mention here is that sometimes I'm just going to throw this out there. You have to really think about why the rules are the rules, because sometimes we have these cueing systems or expectations of children's behaviors that is not appropriate or necessary. And so when we're talking about like what are the things are important for children, I think as they transition, we're talking about the stuff that truly in the heart of heart matters. Like how do we help them feel more successful? How do we help them feel confident? How do they help them feel connected? We're not talking about like things like you have to make sure you have your uniform on. Like those aren't the things that I think those aren't important. What's important is valuing who they are as individuals in a virtual platform and translating that into an in-person experience. So I just want to throw that out there because I have been in so many conversations recently about the expectations of virtual learning in the home. And then I get frightened that then that's what we're expecting children in the class to do in the classroom. So I just want to throw that out there.
Absolutely. Well, and so many of those things were in our classrooms before this online thing happened, of just, again, remembering to think about that. Do we need to line up by boys and girls? Is that really necessary? Is that...
Oh, don't even get me started on the boy and girl thing. Oh my goodness, you just opened a big can. Don't do that. Because we've stopped dressing kids as boys and girls. Stop dividing them up as boys and girls. We've got kiddos that are non-binary kiddos. We've got kiddos who don't identify, even at a very young age, are identifying not as a girl or not as a boy. Just stop doing that.
So let's not put them in that uncomfortable. I was even thinking with that Ella Jenkins song that I brought up very early on, is if we say, he did. Well, does he choose to be referred to using that pronoun? And so starting very early of that, people have choices of how we're going to refer to them and consider each person. Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I'm trying to think now. Wait, what? I was thinking of something
I
else
totally
as you.
derailed you.
That's all right. Yeah. So all the things. So again, just practicing all those things that if it is going to be an expectation when they come in, you mentioned, and it's so true in preschool, we've been washing our hands for 20 seconds minimum. It just is what it is. And so I kind of found it amusing when they were saying to everyone in the world now, wash your hands for 20 seconds. But if you want them to do that, how are you going to help them be successful? And so maybe even pretend to be doing it. And what's the routine? Are you going to sing a song? What song? Are there songs that go with that? But giving them all those kinds of experiences, the more you can do it. So you talked earlier about that a lot of teachers were giving tours of the classroom, which I think is wonderful, so that it's familiar, but it might also be a lot. And here's the art area, and here's the reading area, and here's this. So maybe also pulling a couple things out, on one day saying, here are some things that you're going to see in the block area. There's this, and that's enough for that day. So that there's also just kind of a slower pace. Again, you're helping them to be familiar, but not, and you're going to see 10,000 things when you come in and possibly feeling overwhelmed with it. So many things I think are, they're not that different. It's what we were talking about before. The ideas are the same. The underlying foundation is completely the same. It's just, how are we going to do it? And I think as adults, we've been through so much and have our own feelings to deal with and figure out that this is a time, as they're transitioning back into the classroom, we've got to figure out what are the practices that I can do that are going to support them in that. And just acknowledging this is what we're here to do. We're not saying it's easy, but it's what we've got to do is how to make the best of it. Yeah.
So yesterday I chatted online with Jess from Phoenix Modern. And one of the things that she talked about at the very beginning of the talk was when they first started sort of envisioning opening the school up, they talked a lot around outcomes. And I think it's a very common language in the kindergarten on up world to talk about outcomes and to focus on, what are the end goals, the end game, right, that we expect at every grade level. And then we back out of that and go, okay, then we have to start from day one doing ... Mm-hmm. And I think if you didn't get a chance, if you're watching us now, if you haven't had a chance to see Jess's her talk, or our conversation, I think it was so good because I think that everyone right now is so worried about outcomes. Like we need to start. Children need to be sitting and learning, and so . It's like we have lost sight of what's really important when we ignore these connections that are necessary. We have lost sight when we are so focused on, while come to kindergarten or think about kindergarten, the letter recognition and reading and writing, like when that becomes our focus, we have missed the boat, basically. Children are the focus, and children, we need to pay close attention from a heart space, pay close attention to what our children need. And every classroom and every group of children they're going to need something, I think, unique to some degree, but across every classroom, it's safety and it's connection. And I just hope that anyone who's watching this can hear the message that as you think about these transitions, please put that on the forefront. The outcomes, I'm not saying those outcomes aren't important, but they're not important right now. What's important, or I would say ever.
And so I think if someone's feeling like, well, yeah, except for my principal or my, or whatever, right, or this is what expected, absolutely. But I really believe, and I was an administrator and I saw this time and time again, if you start from this point, from what is essential right now, are making connections and supporting all of that. And if you look at a lot of the ideas that we were just sharing today, and you're doing it because you need to have that foundation, but then you look at which standards are being addressed in this? You talked about doing the matching game, and there could be names with that, and hearing there's all this language development going on. There's all kinds of math skills going on in all of these different things. One-to-one correspondence. That will be there. We didn't talk about, but you've probably talked about in so many other situations, a kid who does the "we wish you well," and making cards and the writing that goes with that. Why do you do "we wish you well" cards? Because it's so important in terms of the heart connections and all of that. But guess what? And I think actually that the academics are more solidly addressed that way because they're done for a real, authentic reason. Not this worksheet, but it's connected to this is how we work as a community. So I think it's kind of a win-win and the opposite is true too. You really aren't going to be able to effectively address those academics if you don't have this in here. So yeah,
So I want to just make reference to the "wish you well" that you were talking about. It comes from Dr. Becky Bailey in Conscious Discipline, and we support Conscious Discipline 100%. And one of the things that we talk quite a bit in our trainings is to recognize who's not there each day. And so when a child is out sick for whatever reason, even virtually, that the song that again comes from Dr. Becky Bailey is "We Wish You Well," and it goes something like this. We wish you well. We wish you well. All through the day today.
We wish you well.
And then what happens is because every child should have a job in the classroom, that there is someone who does a "wish you well" card. And so a child will, and then that can be done depending on the age, because, we do it as young as, 3 years of age, all the way up. And maybe, it could go all the way across all levels. But depending, on how much they're able to write on their own, we have their names written out for them so that they can go find that child's name who's missing. And then also some of those like words like "we hope you feel better," or "we miss you," or "I love you," or whatever kids kind of generate as their ideas for why someone might be out. And I used to do that with kids. So I used to say, why do you stay home? Like sometimes, what can we wish them if they're not here? Is it, I hope you get better. Like I said, whatever the kids come up with. Sometimes it's a little crazy, but it's okay. And so I make a list, and I usually use rings and then, put them together so the child can go find that message and then write it on a card. And it could be a piece of paper, it could be an index card, it doesn't need to be anything fancy. But that child will then find that card in their cubby the next day. And I'll tell you, every single group of children I ever had, those kiddos will come back the next day and they'll say something like, "I heard you singing 'We Wish You Well.' I knew you were doing that. I knew there was going to be a card in my cubby." It really speaks to how important that sense of connection and belonging is when we're super intentional about it.
And again, and I know, Isela, that you did that because of the importance of those heart connections and having children involved in that. But for the other side, for those of you who are going, but we've got to address the academics. I taught kindergarten for many years. Some of the first sight words that those children could read and could write were "I," "love," "you," right? And the names of all the other children in the classroom, because there was also pictures of children with their names next to it. So again, it's just a great example where, so if I was going, I need to drill you on these sight words, "I" and "you" and this and that, I know it would have taken much longer and it wouldn't have had the relevance. So yeah,
Yeah, one of the conversations I had recently was about teaching with children as opposed to teaching to children. Our system is built on the perspective of teaching to children or teaching at children. And when we are starting to really understand how to come from an authentic place, so that experiences are real and they are relevant and they are meaningful, we have to shift the lens from teaching to rather to teaching with. that when we have an understanding of who they are, when we have an understanding of like their developmental progressions, like where they are on that continuum, and we really understand what they're interested in, what gets them excited, we're able to make learning. And I think that the academic stuff, it's like all of that's tied in together because they are naturally motivated to want to know how to get excited about that opportunity. And it also empowers them to really, and it opens the door, it empowers them and it opens the doors for them to soar, to go beyond our expectations.
They absolutely do. And they see themselves as competent and being able to achieve these goals that they have created for themselves. And what I see is children working really hard because it's important to them. It's not us trying to cram something down. It's they're like, oh, I want to be able to do this. This makes sense to me. It just also, it's also important, but it just also makes a really nice classroom to teach in and it's not that you don't have your things going on and stresses and things, but you created this community. It's the school family, and it feels good for everyone to be in there. It makes such a difference.
It makes such a difference, especially I think right now where we have all these stressors going on in the world, right? And when you step into your classroom, as we're talking about moving from virtual to in-person, for administrators who are watching, I think it's important for us to recognize that, we are asking a lot of teachers and educators and anyone who's working in and around the schools. And I think that if we can create those experiences, because teachers are unfortunately, or have been historically, had the expectation for them to really focus primarily on outcomes rather than looking at how do we reach those outcomes in a way that is authentic, in a way that is meaningful, in a way that brings joy and happiness into a classroom. Teachers, like I said, it's a struggle to show up for lots of reasons. But if we can create an experience where we're really responsive to creating enjoyable, happy places for children to be and for the adults to be. Every time I reflect on, even because I'm in classrooms a lot now, and we see some magical experience happen. A kid gets excited about something, creates something, shares, has a conflict that they're dealing with, and we're on the sideline watching him be able to articulate his frustrations and successfully move through that. It's like those joyful types of experiences should be happening throughout our day, not where, how do I get them to sit? How do I get them to listen? How do I get them to finish this, whatever, but rather create this fluidity where there's these maybe moments of challenge, but moments of success and excitement, and that we can collectively support each other and celebrate one another.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's all I've got, Isela. But you know what I think is it really comes down to, because we could just throw out and knowing you and me, we could sit here and just get all excited about many different ideas. I think what people really have to do is say, okay, what am I going to do? How can I make one with this idea that the children come in, they see themselves in a real way in the classroom. They've contributed in some ways. There's some recognition of each other, acknowledgement of feelings. And just again, nothing is all new to them. We've had this chance to give them that support and really welcome them into the classrooms.
So I'm going to jump on a word you said, in a real way. I think that's one of the shifts I think we don't really think about it, is we don't think about how sometimes we look at children as less than, or, well, I share this all the time in trainings. If we ever have said, don't treat me like a child, or she said something to me like I was 4, right? That says to me that we believe even if it's a deep subconscious level, that they're less than, right? And so that real experience means I value who you are as an individual. I see you as a contributing member of this classroom community. And I think that when we honor every single child that way, we see them as real human beings with real emotional experiences, with real ideas. I think it allows for them to flourish, for them to see themselves as that. And I think that is probably the greatest foundation that we can offer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Especially when we're looking at, when they talk about kindergarten readiness, I'm so sick of that kindergarten readiness. I think if we just really focus primarily on doing the best that we can do in making their experiences or offering the experiences to be real, relevant, and meaningful, we wouldn't have to have the conversation about kindergarten readiness.
Right. And what does it mean that if you're not ready for kindergarten, you don't get to come? We reject you? I'm not quite sure what it means, but yeah.
Right.
But rather than seeing it as like, yeah, we welcome you and we'll work from there. We will be, we're here to support them. And being them.
And celebrate
it. Absolutely.
That's an important part. So I think from an administrator standpoint, I always think about that as I was an administrator for like 12 years. And so for me, it's really looking at how can I offer support? How can I offer, I need to hold space for folks who are really struggling with this. That's an important thing, to come from a non-judgmental place.
Yeah.
But also to recognize, how do we come together as a cohesive community, not just with children, but with one another, so that we can create a climate where children feel safe through this experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you. I think it's always fun. I come on and I talk, so it's always, it's like somebody listens. Thank you for listening. But it's always fun to have a conversation with someone, and I like you said, we could probably go on for hours. But then no one except us will listen to each other.
That's right. We're
all done. Yeah. So thank you very much, Debbie, for hanging out with me and having this conversation.
And so nice just to say to the teachers, I wish them so well, and moving forward on this. It's amazing to be doing this during these kinds of times, at all times, but even more so now. And if there's any way of being a little bit of help, I would be delighted.
Yeah. So if anyone is interested in terms of consultation, coaching, that sort of thing, you can get a hold of either of us on the Alessi Group website. So www.alessigroup.com. If you want to connect directly with Debbie, I think that contact information might be on there. If not, just email me and say, hey, we want to connect with Debbie, and I can give you that information.
And then we can talk about specifics of how to do things. Rather than generality.
We don't do, everything we do is really based on specific needs of schools and programs. So it's never just a, one shot, this is the training we offer. It's really, what do you need and how can we provide that in the best possible way? Yeah. All right. So thank you all very much for hanging in with us.